guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to go over the state of Tearlaments in the TCG. And I'll push out a lot of Tearlament content for you guys, so if I'm doing too much, please let me know. Nothing wrong with criticism or any feedback. But I figure as far as the TCG goes, it's been a while since I've talked about it. Has to have been at least like 6 months, right? But yes, with the Band of a Rise Heart, this deck is seeing a lot of play on Dueling Book, and I expect it to be rather present at the YCS and Dormant. So I wanted to just discuss how I felt with the deck. It's a standard deck list in my eyes, a kind of like a analysis on where it lies within the format, and then I also wanted to talk about one of the cards that I think is really bad in the deck that a lot of people are playing, and I want to just explain my thought behind that. So yeah, let me get into it. Now before I continue, go check out tsx1.com. Use code potato10 for 10% off on all your sleeves. And let's get into the video. Okay, so this is what I would call a standard tier deck, at least in my perspective. Notice here, the card that I'm not playing that I think everyone else plays is King of the Swamp. I'll explain that in a second, but first I want to talk about kind of what the deck is like. This isn't like the Tier Shizu deck. This plays almost like a Lightsworn deck from a couple years ago, like a Clownblade Lightsworn deck, where once you get milling, the deck is rather strong. You have a lot of graveyard effects, and you get a lot of advantage really fast. However, where I feel the weakness in the deck is, though, is that if you can't get to milling, this deck is rather bad. And obviously, you have some brick hands because of the amount of high reward cards you have to play, like Mally, Traps, Scream, etc. And then even when you don't have those cards in your hand, and you have like starters like Diviner or whatever, you only have so many cards that mill, and you know they are a little restrictive. Some of them may be too many normal summons. But say you have a Diviner, I think there are too many games where you fold to an Ash or Veiler on that Diviner, or it's a way to stop the Kellic or Guido from triggering, and then you kind of just have to go past from there. And that's a problem. Obviously, that is not a recipe for success. It kind of feels like where Branded was, where when it gets going, the deck is incredibly strong. However, it's a bit bricky, and it felt like it folded to one interrupt too often. And I think those are the absolute, like, exact symptoms that I felt when playing this deck. And there are absolutely moments where this deck shines and it feels invincible. And there are matchups as well where your plays just feel so good into their interactions. But there are just many games where I feel like I don't get to do anything, and it's not even because of my opponent. It's because my deck just kind of failed me. So I think moving forward, Tier as a whole is going to start trying to find new or find the best way to, you know, kind of juggle the ratios of cards that get you going, get you milling, and cards that actually give you payoff from your mill. It's very hard to find that balance. You need to make sure you have the absolute right value cards in there. And that's part of where it gets me into the talks of King of the Swamp and this Kashtira Fenrir as well, because that's one that I keep getting asked about on Twitch chat as well when it's not on my deck. So I guess I'll go over Fenrir rather quickly. I think this card is probably better than the other card I mentioned, but my issue with it is it doesn't actually serve any purpose extremely well. The reason you want to play it is you have the utility of a card that is okay going second, and still good going first to draw. However, I think it is a bad mill, so it has to take up one of the spots in your deck that you have to be okay with milling a bad card. But when you draw it, it's not nearly as meaningful as one of the other cards that filled that role as well. It's not as meaningful as a Diviner. It's not as meaningful as the Planet. It's not as meaningful as Talents. And then almost every other card of the deck actually is good to mill. And when you get to that kind of conclusion, you realize it's almost not worth it to play cards that are only good in your hand, unless they are really good. And while Fenrir is decent, I don't think this does enough going second to really break through fields. And going first, it's obviously just average. Getting you a tier cash is not terrible, but it's not that good either. Especially because if you get going, you will see Sullick, you will see Planet with the Trivia Karma, you will see ways to search more tier names, and almost always that means tier cash. And by that logic, you'll always have tier cash anyways. It's not really that important unless that is the card that's getting you started. But the thing is, Fenrir add tier cash doesn't really lead anywhere by itself. You need to banish a tier card for tier cash still. Oftentimes that means from the hand if it's your only play. And that's a bit, you know, dicey for me. I don't love it from that perspective. But then people also tell me play King of the Swamp. Now this is the one that I think is horrible. We've seen it being played a lot in OCG, and I believe it's hit there now. I don't get why this card is played. I mean, I do get why. I don't get why people like it. So the logic behind King of the Swamp is that you can use it to substitute any fusion material to make Rakalos still, to make the Dark World fusion, just to increase the power level of the deck. And then the other reason why King of the Swamp is better than, say, the Obese King of the Swamp is that you can use it to add polymerization back to the hand and then make Guardian Chimera. Now, whenever you're looking at a card, you have to evaluate if it's actually filling the roles that you are specifying to it. So we want to make sure that A, it's actually making our boards better in a meaningful way, and B, that it is helping us go second. And the thing is, let's talk about, is it going first? Yes, it's going first, but do we need it to make our fields, or do we need the extra power from it to make our fields better? And the answer is no. If you play this deck, take this list and just do solo hands with it, you'll see the boards of this deck are phenomenal either way. You are ending on Baron, Beatrice, Planet, Trap, and Kaleido Heart with a Sharpling Grave as almost like a minimum. And you can almost always do like Window Mar or Dweller or both, or the Scream as well, the other Shuffler 2, the other Trap. The turn 1 is incredible in this deck. There's no doubt about that. And if I was going first with any deck, this is probably the deck I'd feel the most comfortable with. Only other deck that maybe feels as strong is like Unchained. And that's saying something because that deck is incredibly resilient going first. But even then, this board is stronger. The only issue is that it's probably less consistent than Unchained. And I don't think King of Swamp fixes that consistency issue. Adding the poly from deck to hand isn't really going to help get you started. You have to be able to fuse the Agito or Kael'bek away if it's stuck in your hand as a way to start. And that doesn't really happen. I've done that a couple times before when I did play King of the Swamp, where I had to make Guardian Chimera on my first turn. And that blows. That's not good. Sometimes it ends up being okay, but obviously that's a scenario you want to avoid. But yeah, I don't think it really fills the role that well. I think you have to eat up 2 extra deck spots for cards that don't matter. Bestials don't actually hurt this deck that much, so you don't really need Volcalos for it. You will almost always get Baron onto the field, so you are almost always protected from Nibiru. Kaleido Heart's also very safe against Nibiru because it'll come back. You have good countermeasures against Nibiru. It's not like you need Volcalos for it. And the Bestials hitting 1 or 2 tier names is fine because this is like a Lightsworn deck almost, where once you get milling at all the graveyard effects and you pop off like that, you'll still get plenty of value between Solix, Meta Noise, Screams, Heartbeats, Shadalls, Mallies, Destrudos, the point where you can resolve 0 tier names and still be a functional deck, which is crazy. Of course, the tier names are good, but they're actually not like a life system for this deck. You can just play without them. It's almost astonishing how fine the deck is without them. The biggest thing is milling. You have to get milling. King of the Swamp doesn't contribute to that, and that's the biggest thing I'd want to be. When I draw it, I'd rather it just be a card that either had a better graveyard effect or that had a way to get me to start milling. That's why I have something card destruction in this deck, because in my shittier hands, this can be the way to get the engine going and put cards in the grave, albeit it's obviously a lot worse than something like Foolish for a Miller. And that's my logic there with why King of the Swamp isn't really going first. You don't need it for the strong end fields. I think Mally and Denier are way better mills, and while they may be a little worse going in your hand, adding the poly I think is an insignificant thing anyways, and you can still fuse these from the hand. And then as far as making your fields, you're significantly stronger because Dangerous is a 1-card Beatrice at the very least, but usually it's, let's say you go into Dangerous, then it's a Cross Sheep, and then Revive like a Diviner, and then immediately sets up like Baron, Beatrice, like by itself almost, which is just incredible. But these cards are really good, and I've seen people play both together, which is fine. I think the Destiny Hero cards are phenomenal and you kind of have to play them, but you say, okay, you already have that and you want to play King of the Swamps, then I have to ask, why do you need them now? Because you don't actually need the power. The power is so good in this deck. Yeah, I mean, I'm rambling at this point. I'm going to move on to the second point of King of the Swamp. So King of the Swamp going second, let's talk about what it does. Obviously the main point here is that King of the Swamp lets you make Guardian Chimera. Now the issue I have with the Guardian Chimera is similar to the issue I had playing it in Despia, and that is it makes removal good against your deck, because oftentimes a single target removal like Unchained Escape isn't actually very effective against you, because you can swarm the field enough that it's not that big of an issue once you get going. But poly into Chimera as your lead play to break the field does make removal look good against you, because now when you go summon a monster and go poly, they can go chain, and then your Chimera doesn't resolve. You don't get to a Chimera. There's also worlds where you just have nothing to fuse and you just threw away a card, which is fantastic. Normal summon and polygon away. That's amazing. And that point, it requires multi-card combinations to do something meaningful. But that's not really where you want to be. There are some games where the Diviner resolves and you get to do a bunch and you get to like Kaleido Heart and you spin the Caesar, so that card is gone now. They can't stop Poly. And then the Poly goes in and ends their life. Yes, but those games you should win without it. Again, the problem is getting milling. When you get milling, your deck's incredible. You don't need the King of the Swamp at that point. And that's just the biggest thing I've been noticing. It doesn't actually help in the scenarios people say it helps in. And like the Fenrir, it needs to meet the criteria of being good enough going first, or good enough in the grave, or good enough going second. And I don't think it meets any of these criteria up to par like the rest of this deck does. I think it's worse in the grave than every other card that has a graveyard effect here. I think it is worse in the hand than cards like Talents, Planet, or whatever. And I think it's worse going second than Gameciel, which fills a similar role of being a fusion material that has a hand effect to break fields going second. I think just having more Aquas is necessary to make Kaleido Heart more often, yes. Gameciel does it better. May do less going first, but you're never using Poly going first anyways. And this also is besides the fact that Poly is yet another brick that you're adding to your deck. Now, obviously, it's not the worst brick if you feel Guardian Chimera is good, because you're still doing that at least. I don't know, not the hugest fan. I think if you want to play something like King of the Swamp, you need to find a way to where you can go Polymerization and then chain a spell to special summon. Obviously, this doesn't even work in this meta because the whole thing you're trying to do is like beat a Caesar. But say it was just removal in play, and you're playing this type of deck like Despia because of its good matchup against removal, then the way to make Poly work would be able to go like Poly and then chain Branded Opening. That's what I liked when I played Despia, or Chain Griffin was also a cool one. If you can do that, cool. This deck can't, though. It's just Tear Catch that does that. And again, managing card in the hand sucks, and you almost always cannot do one from the grave. Now to keep going about the decks, onto the specific deck list here. So no King of Swamp, no Fenrir is fine. And then you'll notice here that the extra deck, makes up for that as well. You have more space here. I think Cross Sheep's good. I think it's really, really good when you're playing the Mally stuff. And that gives you lines and access code. The pop 2 that's not targeting is nice, because the rest of your deck really does target. Your exception to non-targeting is Zeus and access code. So just having those multiple options to deal with those unique threats is helpful. It's good coverage, and it's people put up damage very easily. Obviously, there's a lot of IPs or Souls of Rage in the format, so Dark Charm and Revive, one of those, can just put up a lot of damage really fast. Sprin's obviously good as well for enabling your plays. This deck has access to Dweller, Redoer, Beatrice is insane, Zeus is insane, and then all the fusions. Garura is one you don't always need, but I figured if you are playing Zero Poly, then you can play it. I took it out for Talents because Talents is more generic and better going first into the problem identified, which is like Ash Veiler. But obviously it's not dead. Still, you can still use it when you have multiple tier names in the grave. Like if you mill a Sharon and you already use it this turn, or you don't want to use it, and then you mill Hamnos later on, and the level 6 attributing or level 6, stat is very helpful for you to extend your plays. So that's the one thing you can change, I guess. Ignore the side deck is something I built quickly for playing DB on stream. But yeah, so where I feel this deck stands currently, at this very moment in time, there is a very small chance this is the deck I bring to YCS Dormant. I just don't think it has the power, or it has the consistency to win. I think it has nice matchups. When it gets going, it feels really good. Too many times, though, either brick or I lose to Veiler, and I feel like there's a lot of Dwellers in the format right now, even just mirror matches. And I don't like the lack of control you have. This mirror is not skillful like Shizu. Again, it's like a Lightsworn deck where you just want to get going. And if you lose the roll in the mirror, I feel like you have very little counterplay. On the bright side, when you get going, I feel like there's very few engine or non-engine cards that stop you. I think the Bestials aren't enough a lot of the time. But we'll see. I also think a lot of people won't have great builds for this event, but we'll see if I'm proven wrong. Very well, they could be. Or that I could be wrong and I may not have the best deck here, but either way, at least that's my current thoughts as we lead into the event. And that's my main hesitation for playing this deck. I really wish I could play it, but the amount of shifters I see now, even with no cash, the amount of Dwellers I see, and the games where you brick or you lose to a Veiler or Ash are just scary. So for now, I will not be playing Tearlament, and it makes me sad. I really wish I could play this, but I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on the deck, my opinion on the deck, what a current deck list looks like, and then also where I think it stands in the meta right now. If I had to redo that tier list for the meta decks that I posted earlier this week, I may move it down a bit. I may go to playable rogue, top of playable rogue. I just think this may be a lot riskier of a choice to bring twice as Dormant than the other tier 1 picks. Anyways, that's it for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you all later. Peace.